The rain poured down in soft sheets, turning the city's glow into a hazy blur of lights. In a quiet little cafe tucked away on a corner street, a woman sat by the window, nervously stirring her coffee. Her name was Emily Carter, a 28-year-old marketing assistant who had learned that love, much like life, never went according to plan. She had been stood up 3 times before, each one leaving a little crack in her belief that good men still existed. Tonight was supposed to be different. Her best friend had arranged a blind date, swearing that this one would be worth it. But as the clock struck 7:45, 15 minutes past the agreed time, Emily's hope began to fade again. She sighed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as the bell above the cafe door chimed. If you believe that kindness, second chances, and true love still exist in this world, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps stories like this reach more hearts that need a little light. A tall man entered, rain dripping from his coat. His jeans were faded, his shoes scuffed, and his hair was damp, but his eyes, a soft, thoughtful brown, held something that made her pause. He looked around awkwardly, then spotted her. With a shy smile, he approached and introduced himself as Ryan. His voice was calm, humble, and sincere. Not the smooth tone of a polished businessman or an online flirt, but something real, grounded. Emily forced a polite smile, expecting another disappointing evening, but as the minutes turned into hours, she found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Ryan wasn't like anyone she had met before. He spoke about small joys, reading under a tree, helping an old neighbor fix his fence, volunteering at a shelter. He listened to her, truly listened, as if her words mattered. When the waiter came with the bill, Ryan hesitated for a second, reaching for his wallet with a faint nervousness. Emily noticed the worn-out leather and the few folded bills inside. He insisted on paying, but she gently placed her card on the table instead. Walking home in the drizzle, Emily couldn't help but smile. Something about him stayed with her, his simplicity, his honesty, and how he seemed to see the world differently. But she couldn't ignore the obvious: he didn't have much. He mentioned doing odd jobs, delivering packages, sometimes helping with repairs. He wasn't the kind of man who could promise luxury or stability. And yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart whispered, give him a chance. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings became more frequent. Ryan always showed up in modest clothes, always brought her small, thoughtful gifts, like a flower he found growing by the sidewalk, or a notebook because she once mentioned wanting to write again. Emily's friends didn't approve. "You're wasting your time," they said. "He's sweet, but you can't build a future on kindness alone." Still, she followed her heart. Then came the night that changed everything. They sat by the riverside, the city lights dancing on the water. Ryan looked distant, almost sad. Emily reached for his hand and asked what was wrong. He took a deep breath and said softly, "Would you still care for me if I had nothing to offer? If I could never buy you expensive things or take you on trips around the world?" Emily was quiet for a long moment before she said, "I don't need those things, Ryan. I just want honesty, loyalty, and love. The rest doesn't matter." He smiled faintly, almost painfully, and said, "Then I'm the luckiest man alive." But deep down, he knew he wasn't being entirely honest. Because Ryan wasn't a poor man. He was the hidden heir and CEO of a massive tech corporation, a position he had inherited after his father's passing a few months earlier. But he had grown tired of the fake smiles, the empty conversations, and the people who only cared about his wealth. So he took a break from it all, disappearing into the world as just another man trying to find meaning. He wanted to know if love could exist without money, if someone could love him, not his fortune. The next few months were magical. Emily and Ryan grew closer, their connection deep and real. She often helped him with job applications, unaware that he already owned half the city's skyline. They'd walk through thrift shops, eat street food, and spend hours talking about dreams, hers to open a small art studio, his to live a quiet, meaningful life. But one morning, everything began to unravel. Emily was called to her office for an urgent meeting. Her company had just landed a huge contract, with one of the most influential CEOs in the city, Ryan Sterling. When she saw the name on the presentation screen, her heart skipped. The company logo appeared, Sterling Technologies. The same name Ryan had once written absent-mindedly on a napkin. But she brushed it off as coincidence. Until that evening, when she saw him. She had been invited to a charity gala by her boss to represent her department. The ballroom shimmered with elegance, filled with the city's elite. And there, on the stage, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and a confident smile, was Ryan. Her Ryan. The man she thought was struggling to make ends meet. The announcer introduced him as the youngest self-made millionaire and CEO of Sterling Technologies. Her world froze. Ryan's eyes found hers across the crowd. The warmth in them faltered, replaced by guilt. He stepped down from the stage, trying to reach her, but she had already turned away, tears burning her eyes. She felt betrayed, humiliated. Everything she had believed about him, about them, crumbled. She left the gala without a word. That night, Ryan called, texted, even showed up at her door, but she refused to see him. Her heart ached, not because he was rich, but because he had lied. Weeks passed. Emily threw herself into work, trying to bury the pain. Every night, she replayed their moments together, wondering which parts were real. Then one afternoon, she found a letter slipped under her apartment door. It was from Ryan. In it, he explained everything. How he had grown tired of a world obsessed with wealth, how he wanted to meet someone who saw him for who he truly was. He admitted his fear, that if he had told her the truth, she would have treated him differently. He ended the letter with one line that shattered her: "You showed me what love looks like when it's pure. Whether you forgive me or not, I'll always be grateful for that." Tears blurred her vision as she folded the letter. For days, she couldn't decide. Part of her wanted to forgive him, but part of her still felt wounded by the deception. Then, one rainy evening, fate intervened again. Emily was walking home when she saw a familiar figure kneeling beside a car on the roadside, helping an elderly man fix a flat tire. It was Ryan. Drenched, his hands covered in grease, still helping a stranger. That simple act reminded her of the man she had fallen for, not the CEO, not the millionaire, but the kind, humble soul who once brought her a flower from the street. Without thinking, she walked toward him. When he turned, their eyes met, and for a long, fragile moment, neither spoke. Then Emily whispered, "You should have trusted me." Ryan lowered his gaze, his voice trembling. "I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn that trust back, if you'll let me." The rain poured harder, but she didn't care. She stepped closer, tears mixing with the rain, and said, "Just promise me, no more secrets." He nodded, and she finally smiled, whispering, "Then come home." That night, under the flickering streetlight, they embraced, not as a CEO and a struggling woman, but as two souls who had finally found their truth. Months later, Emily opened her dream art studio, funded not by Ryan's wealth, but by her own hard work. Ryan, true to his word, never used his money to control her dreams. Instead, he supported her quietly, showing up every morning with coffee, proud and content. They built a life not out of luxury, but of laughter, trust, and shared sunsets. People often whispered about how lucky she was to marry a millionaire, but Emily always smiled and said, "He was never rich when I fell for him, and that made all the difference." And Ryan, every time he looked at her, knew that for all his wealth and power, she was his greatest fortune. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps spread stories that remind us that love isn't about money or appearances, it's about truth, trust, and the courage to forgive. Speech balloon special request: comment below, would you forgive someone who hid their true identity for love? As the final scene fades, imagine them standing together by the riverside once more, the same place where it all began. The rain still falls softly, but this time, it feels like a blessing. Because sometimes, love finds us in disguise, only to reveal the truest parts of who we really are.